Hello, and welcome to another episode of Did Jesus Exist? On tonight's episode, we're going to be discussing dates, and if the Bible actually gives us any kind of indication as to what these dates might be, and what we might expect out of an actual historical Jesus if he were to have actually existed. Now, if you're sitting there and you're thinking that we don't really have any dates for Jesus because the first century really wasn't recorded all that well. And the historians at the time really weren't concerned with some petty low-life prophet like Jesus and all of these other weird reasons why Jesus wouldn't have been recorded in history. I'm gonna have to call bullshit on you just a little bit. Because, in fact, Jesus was important enough to be recorded in history. We have specific dates in the past for other big moments. And I would think that the most important man in the history of the world would be a pretty big fucking deal, wouldn't you think? So what kind of dates are we looking for? What would we expect out of actual history? Well, we would expect the date of his birth, his death, perhaps him riding in Jerusalem on the back of that donkey. How about him running into the money changers in the temple and him causing all kinds of ruckus in there? How about when he was crucified and earthquakes happened and there was 3 days of darkness? Those are some major things in Jesus' life, as depicted by the Bible, that would have caught the attention of historians. Now, if you're going to sit there and say that historians at the time weren't paying attention to these particular things, or they weren't writing them down, or he wasn't important enough to be noticed, or whatever, well, see, we have specific dates for people in the past. Like, for instance, Julius Caesar was killed 15 March 44 BCE. He was followed up by Cleopatra, who was killed in August 12, 30 BCE. And then we have another thing that happened that we're going to go into a little bit more depth about, which was Mount Vesuvius erupting and destroying Pompeii on August 24th, 79 AD. Now, ironically, this is right around the time when the Bible was being written, because the Bible was written, around about this time. And so what should we expect out of contemporary historians out of this time? And this is a really good example of what we should expect out of people in the first century as far as historians and whatnot. So, what do we have for the evidence of Pompeii? And of course, I'm using Richard Carrier's method for proving a historical event or person or whatnot, proving history, I guess. And in that, Carrier gives the example of Caesar crossing the Rubicon. In that, Carrier points out that we have contemporary records from Caesar himself, from the Roman side, the contemporary historians over there. We have the enemy side, the people that were being invaded by Julius Caesar. We have objective observers, like historians that had no stake in the matter at all. They just recorded the events as they were going on. But on top of all that, we have physical evidence, like coins that were minted showing Caesar crossing the Rubicon. This level of corroboration for this historical event is kind of what we're looking for when we're examining Jesus or Pompeii or any kind of historical event. So what we have with Mount Vesuvius erupting and destroying Pompeii is a complete account of Vesuvius erupting, including the years prior to it erupting and the effects that it had on the surrounding area. Like, for instance, in February of 62 AD, there were earthquakes that started happening, and this signified that the volcano was getting ready to blow its lid. And then following year in 64 AD, there was another earthquake. Now, you see, we can't say whether or not there were earthquakes in between there. We just have two corroborating contemporary sources that pin both of those earthquakes at Pompeii around that time. So that's how we know those two earthquakes existed. We can't say for certain that there weren't more earthquakes in between there, but we just know that those two existed, and they were precursors to Vesuvius erupting. So, and then after that, the earthquakes and whatnot, they got so frequent that the Romans, they just, they got used to it. They got used to the earthquakes happening and the tremors happening and just the ground rumbling in general. And this was recorded by one contemporary historian. And then starting on August 20th, 79 AD, earthquakes started happening in a continuous manner. And they didn't stop until Vesuvius exploded. And we know this because a contemporary historian at the time recorded the event. But on top of all that, we also have physical evidence. We have Pompeii. Nobody in the city had any kind of idea that Vesuvius was going to explode. So, we have all this mountains of evidence for Pompeii, for Vesuvius exploding. And all of this builds a rock-solid case for the events that happened at Pompeii. So, what does this mean for the historicity of Jesus, you might ask yourself? Well, what should we see out of like a historical Jesus? We can pinpoint the death of an Egyptian queen, and we can pinpoint the death of a Roman emperor. We can pinpoint the deaths of several thousand people in a city in Italy, but yet we can't pinpoint one of the supposed most famous men of all time. Even in the accounts of the Bible, there's a fuzzy line of about 10 years where Jesus could have been born. He was either born in the reign of King Herod, or he was born like 10 years after that. There's a very fuzzy line there. There's also a very fuzzy line around the date of his death, because the book of John actually has Jesus dying on a completely different day than the other three Gospels. Another fun fact is that in John, Jesus' ministry actually lasted a lot longer than the other three Gospels. So, we do not have any kind of accurate account of when he was born or when he died. And you would think that if this man was important enough, that if he came into Jerusalem, came into this area, and he was just so spectacular, so fucking miraculous, that people were just in fucking awe of him all the goddamn time, you would think that people would know these things about him. Hell, even today, there are people out there that know like exactly when, where, and how famous celebrities were born. How could people not want to know back then when Jesus was born? There was no way that question did not fucking come up in any of his sermons. But then you got to ask yourself about any of the other claims in the Bible. Like him riding in Jerusalem on the back of that donkey. Apparently the entire city was there. They were rejoicing over this motherfucker. He was supposed to be just so star-spangled fucking awesome that everybody was on their toes. They were clapping. I'm sure that if he had some Mardi Gras beads, he would have gotten some titty action. Apparently, no historian ever heard about that ever, because it's not recorded. Also, another fun fact is that temple where the money changers were, it's not like it was this small motherfucker either. No, this thing was like 35 football fields big, like stacked. It was huge. It's more likely Jesus led his posse of bros in there, numbering in the hundreds, to go in there and kick the money changers out. And not be just a one-man kung fu Chuck Norris army that just went in there and beat everybody with his fucking beard. Now we get to his crucifixion and the events that happened after he was crucified. Like the earthquakes. Nobody was around to record the earthquakes happening. They recorded the earthquakes that happened prior to Vesuvius erupting, but yet they didn't record the earthquakes that happened after one of the most important men in the history of the world was crucified. Come on. Not only that, but there's a 3 days of darkness that happened as well. How the fuck? There were people recording at the time weird natural occurrences. They were writing them down as they were happening, yet they did not record a mysterious 3 days of darkness. I don't know where the fuck that came from, but we don't have any dates at all, yet we can pinpoint Caesar crossing the Rubicon, Caesar's death, Cleopatra's death, and Vesuvius destroying an entire city. Among the thousands of other things that we can pinpoint in history using Carrier's method. So you really have to sit back and ask yourself, with no accounts for Jesus, his actions, can you really honestly sit there and say that nobody had a reason to record him when there was clearly a reason to record his presence? There were historians at the time recording lesser prophets that you don't even know about now. They were recording them. There were people making fun of religions back then. So you know what? You can call me a radical skeptic. You can call me whatever the fuck you want to. But I can smell bullshit from a mile away on a good day. And today's a good day. And this is bullshit. Again, the source for my information from here came from both Dr. Richard Carrier and David Fitzgerald. I would encourage you to check out both of their books. Richard Carrier has 2 books. I'll be sure to link them below. David Fitzgerald, he's got Nailed, and I'll have that below. I would definitely suggest you going somewhere, checking out all of their books and looking them up, and definitely reading them. I would really love to hear your comments, responses, anything. So please do like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going to be doing more of these Did Jesus Exist episodes with more information as I write them up or think them up. So please subscribe, put me on notification, and don't forget,